first thing I want to do when I'm setting up a reference track, I'm going to make sure that that channel isn't going through my master chain, and that's why I'm setting it to external out. So another thing that I like to do that really helps speed things up in my workflow is set a key map. So I select Command and K, and I'm setting that to 1 on my keyboard, as it's not a shortcut that I use or anything. And whenever I press 1 on the keyboard, it flicks between them. The next massively important thing is getting both tracks at equal loudness. So we're just going to use this loudness meter to measure the LUFS. And if we look at the integrators, so it's currently around 6, and we'll just let that play through the loop and see where it gets to. We're getting around 5.9 LUFS, and LUFS is just basically how we measure loudness. So let's see what my track is. So mine's 6.9, that one's 5.9, so I'm going to drop that track down by 1 decibel, and now we should have both tracks at equal loudness. In terms of LUFS, I mean, if you go deep into metering, that's another topic for debate, I guess. But it is a great tool we have available to us to use it in this way. So we're now at 6.9 on the reference track and 6.9 on mine. There we go. So now we can measure both tracks at equal loudness, so we're not getting things like our ears tricking us into thinking one track's got more bass energy, etc. Again, I'm just flicking the button on my keyboard to go between the two tracks, and you can see it just helps with me not having to use the mouse as much. Comparing at equal loudness is very important, because one could sound like it's got more bass energy just because it's slightly louder. Even by 1 dB it makes a huge difference, which is the reason we've been in this loudness war for so long. So the next thing I like to do is on span. This is more frequency balance. I'm pulling in the reference track through the sidechain input. Then what I'll do is set up span, so the reference track is routed and I can see both frequency spectrum side by side. So now you can look for differences in frequency balance. Obviously in this track it's a remake, so it's going to be aiming to get closer to that graph. But using this in a normal way, I mean one of your own tracks with a reference, you're probably just looking for a ballpark of overall balance of that frequency range. As you can see, I've got a few areas where my bass is jumping out a bit more than this, my low end's not as smooth. But remember, these are just tools, and your ears are the most important thing, but these are useful tools to have to go back and attenuate parts of your mix. So another thing we can do is, let's say we were struggling with the low end, so we can put a filter on the reference track, and this might be a situation where you're not quite getting your balance right at the low end, so you want to compare it with a professional track. So what we're going to do is listen to the reference track. Then I could work in frequency ranges. I could now pull it up so we can hear the lows that are kind of going up into the low mids and compare them. And I'm just going to do the same settings on the reference on my track, and then we can compare them side by side. And you can start to understand the difference between your track and the reference. You might not always need this, but it is a great tool to have for troubleshooting problems of your mix. We can run that through span, and we can compare the frequency balance when the filter's on. So again, you've got those certain frequencies that are jumping out. You could go back and compress the bass in your mix. You know, there's different tools to do that. And you can just see that the low end in mine is not as smooth as the reference track. Another thing that you might want to check is what elements they have in the mid channel. I don't know how accurate it is in terms of taking out the sides compared to flattening it to mono, but if we take the sides out, we can get a good idea. And then again with the sides, we can see how much information is in the sides by taking out the mid channel. And this is quite interesting to see what's going on compared to the reference track. I'm just going to do the same on my track and the reference. So you can hear straight away a lot of my hats are wider than his. Whether that's an issue or not is totally dependent. Again, it can just be a troubleshooting thing. So I might look at pulling them in. I might do it on purpose. That's all down to the production process. But it's just another tool, you know, if you're trying to get a certain sound, if you're trying to figure out how much reverb is on something or how much reverb someone uses in a track, you can always hear that in the side channels. They're just a little troubleshooting tricks, I guess.